They say that in the world of professional fighting, you should never get too excited for anything. It's a cynical view, perhaps, but it's a view born from a history of broken promises and shattered dreams. For months, the air was thick with the promise of something historic. Conor McGregor was coming back. The Mac was returning to the Octagon to reclaim a throne that many believed was still rightfully his. But what we witnessed at UFC 329 wasn't a resurrection, it was arguably the biggest disaster in the history of the sport. It was a moment that felt like a punch to the gut for millions of fans who had forked over their hard-earned money, tuned in for the first time in years, and waited to see their favorite fighter be their favorite fighter one more time. The build-up was a masterclass in nostalgia. We saw the fancy suits, we heard the sharp-tongued trash talk at the pressers, and for a brief moment, it felt like the old days were back. The clock had been turned back a decade. But as the lights dimmed and the walkout music began, something felt off. Instead of the brash, untouchable king we expected, Conor McGregor walked out looking like he had been visited by a ghost. There was a somber, almost melancholy energy about him that stood in stark contrast to the rowdy, crazy persona he had spent years building. And then, in the opening seconds of the fight, the disaster struck. A jump kick, a landing, and a knee that simply nuked itself. In an instant, the record-breaking gate, the 80 million weigh-in views, and the hopes of a global audience were extinguished. In the aftermath of such a baffling disaster, everyone scrambled to make sense of it. The theories began to fly before the referee had even finished calling the fight. Did he come into the octagon already broken? Did he explode so forcefully with that opening kick that his own body couldn't handle the power? Was it an ACL tear, a meniscus, or had his entire knee simply imploded? McGregor himself was quick to deny any pre-existing injury on social media, but in this game, a denial is often just another layer of the strategy. There is a massive incentive to lie. If he knowingly stepped into that cage injured, costing the UFC millions and potentially sabotaging one of the biggest events in history, he would be facing a reputation for being unreliable, a label no fighter can afford to carry, but the evidence for a previous injury is hard to ignore if you look at the walkout and the pre-fight rituals. We aren't talking about body language experts who dissect every shoulder curve, we are talking about universal human expressions. McGregor, a man known for being the most confident person on the planet, looked like a kid trying to play it cool while his world was falling apart. His face was a mask of distraction, of deep sadness, and of a strange, longing look off into the crowd, as if he knew he was seeing them for the last time. He looked shameful, he looked melancholy, and he looked like a man dealing with a weight that no one else could see. He wouldn't even look at Max Holloway. Right before the engagement, when a fighter should be locked in, McGregor was looking off into space, his mind seemingly miles away from the task at hand. Then there was the moment caught on camera after the card, the way he struggled to take his shoes off to step into the inspection zone. Medical experts have speculated that this awkward behavior could have been a subconscious effort to protect a pre-existing injury. Of course, it could just be that getting shoes off is hard sometimes, or that the faces he made were just the nervous energy of a man who hadn't fought in 5 years. But for those who know McGregor best, those who have covered him for a decade, the signs were there. He looked injured on the way out. He looked like something was fundamentally wrong before he even touched the canvas. Even Max Holloway noticed it, remarking that it just didn't seem like the same Conor, yet there is a strong argument for him not being injured. All through fight week, he was moving perfectly fine. He was dynamic, he was explosive, and he even ran up on Max during the presser to rip off his glasses. Many fighters argue that you would never open with a massive jump kick if you knew your knee was compromised. It would be an act of incredible recklessness, a move that could end your career in seconds. Perhaps the somber mood was just nerves, and the erratic choice to throw a giant kick was an attempt to jumpstart his own engine, to force himself into the fight after a long and traumatizing layoff. At 37 years old, with 5 years of inactivity, the reality is that the human body doesn't always replicate the explosion of a simulation or a sparring session. Sometimes, weird things just happen when you get older. Whatever the truth behind the injury, the result is the same. His knee failed him. Whether it was a meniscus tear or an ACL injury, the damage is done. And that leads to the real question that everyone is asking, is Conor McGregor ever going to return? And more importantly, does anyone even want him to? The nostalgia is powerful, but this isn't the McGregor of 2016. That was a decade ago. The fight with Max at 170 pounds didn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of the rankings anyway. It was a spectacle, a moment of what if, and that moment has passed. Throughout the week, we heard about a new Conor. A man who had found religion, who was living in the gym, and who had finally found peace. But as the saying goes, words mean absolutely nothing, it's your actions that define you. McGregor is now at a massive crossroads. It's easy to be the new you when things are going well, but he has just suffered one of the most public and devastating setbacks of his career. Will this push him back toward a path of destruction, or will he find a way to live without the fight? There's a profound thought that has been echoing through the MMA community since that night, the idea that some fighters return to the cage to save themselves, but the cage can't save you. You have to learn to live without the fighting, to figure out who you are if you aren't a warrior. If McGregor is out for another long period, the toll on his psyche will be immense. His last 3 fights, spanning 5 years, have been unmitigated disasters. There is no way that doesn't weigh on a man's soul, especially if that ends up being the final chapter of his story as a fighter. The story of UFC 329 is therefore a story of a great unraveling. It's the story of a man who tried to defy time and physics, and found that the Octagon is the ultimate truth teller. It doesn't care about your suits, your trash talk, or your millions of followers. It only cares about what happens when the bell rings. And for Conor McGregor, the bell rang, and the truth was revealed in the most tragic way possible. The Mac is back, but the era is over. The blessed era continues, and the world of MMA moves on, forever haunted by the night that was supposed to be a resurrection and ended as a disaster, continuing the narrative for full 12-minute depth. To truly understand the magnitude of this disaster, we have to look at the people who were there. Imagine the fans who paid thousands of dollars for a seat in that arena. They weren't just paying for a fight, they were paying for a piece of history. They wanted to be able to say they were there the night the king returned. When McGregor's knee buckled, that dream evaporated in an instant. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was the sound of 20,000 people realizing they had just witnessed the end of something they weren't ready to let go of. And what about the millions watching at home? For many, Conor McGregor is the only reason they watch MMA. He is the gateway to the sport. When he fails, the sport loses a bit of its luster for the casual audience. They don't care about the technicalities of a meniscus tear, they just know that the guy they tuned in to see is gone. This is the danger of building an entire organization around one star. When that star falls, the shadow it casts is long and cold. Let's talk about the technical side of that jump kick for a moment. In the world of high-level martial arts, every move is a calculation of risk and reward. A jump kick is a high-reward move because it's unpredictable and carries immense power. But the risk is in the landing. You are putting your entire body weight, multiplied by the force of gravity, onto a single joint. For a 20-year-old, that joint is like a shock absorber. For a 37-year-old who has already had a titanium rod inserted into his leg, it's like a piece of glass. The fact that McGregor chose that move as his opening gambit tells us everything we need to know about his mindset. He wasn't looking for a tactical victory, he was looking for a miracle. There is also the question of the Zuckerberg glasses moment at the presser. It was a classic McGregor move, aggressive, flashy, and designed to go viral. But in hindsight, it looks like a man trying too hard to convince himself that he still has that it factor. He was trying to manufacture the rowdiness that used to come naturally. When you have to try that hard to be the old you, it's usually because the old you is already gone. The contrast between that forced aggression and the somber walkout is the most telling part of the whole story. Max Holloway, on the other hand, is the antithesis of this drama. Max is a man who has embraced the reality of who he is. He doesn't need to manufacture hype because his work speaks for itself. He is the active legend who shows up and does the job, regardless of the circumstances. His victory at UFC 329, while unsatisfying, is a testament to his professionalism. He was ready for a war, but he was also ready for a disaster. He didn't let the chaos of the McGregor circus affect his focus. He did what he had to do, and he moved on. As we look at the future, the shadow of doubt remains. Will we ever see McGregor in the cage again? Some say he'll be back in 6 to 8 weeks, while others say he's done for good. But even if he does return, will it matter? The spell has been broken. The aura of invincibility is gone, replaced by the clinical reality of a body that is failing. The sport of MMA is a young man's game, and it is a game that rewards activity and consistency above all else. McGregor has had neither for half a decade. The legacy of Conor McGregor is permanent, but it is now a legacy of the past. He will always be the man who changed the game, the man who brought the UFC to the world, and the man who made us all believe in the impossible. But as we close the book on UFC 329, we have to accept that the impossible didn't happen. The king didn't return. The resurrection didn't occur. Instead, we witnessed a great disaster, a somber, factual, and definitive end to one of the most incredible stories in the history of sports. The Octagon is the ultimate truth teller. And on this night, the truth was a hard pill to swallow. The Mac is back, but the body has its limits. The blessed era continues, and the world of MMA moves on, forever changed by the night the music finally stopped. This is the reality of the fight game. This is the truth of the Octagon. And this is the story of the great unraveling of Conor McGregor.